Hi everybody! Today I want to talk about something that I think is very important when it comes to baking, and that is properly measuring ingredients. Okay, if you haven't figured it out at this point, you probably realize that there is a little bit of a science to baking. When it comes to science, we need to make sure that we're getting accurate measurements. We're going to talk about the two most common ways of measuring ingredients and which one is the preferred method. That is, ready? Weighing and volumetric measurements, okay? You already know which one I'm gonna recommend, don't you? And that is weighing. So let's talk about weighing first, and then we'll move on to probably what I feel like most people use at home, using volumes as a way of measuring your ingredients. And I'm talking about cups, spoons, these clear measuring cups, right? Some of you have glass measuring cups. Nothing wrong with that. We'll just talk about the best methods when we're using volumetric measurements. Okay, I really get excited when it comes to scaling. I know, I have problems, but here's the thing. A scale will change your life. I really like these for so many reasons, and I hate a mess. I hate a mess, and these will cut down your dishes as well, because if you've made cookies before, you know that at the end of the cookie making process, while your cookies are in the oven, you look at your counter, flour everywhere, if it's anything like it is when I make cookies with my son at my house, and you've probably got measuring cups and spoons in all the different sizes all over your counter, okay? So let's cut down some of the mess and let's get accurate, okay? Now this one here is probably a little bit more on the commercial side, okay? And what I mean by that is it's got a really large platform, which I love, okay? So the bigger platform is nice because when you put a large bowl, when you're scaling for commercial purposes and you're putting some large bowls on here, a lot of times it can cover your display. When choosing a scale, you also want to keep in mind its capacity, okay? So this one, for example, has a 66-pound capacity. At home, you're probably not measuring 66 pounds of one ingredient. Keep capacity in mind as well. You also want to make sure that your scale has a tare function on it. What I'm talking about is a button that will allow you to subtract the weight of the bowl or whatever measuring container that you're using, okay? So let me just give you a quick example here. If I were to place this container onto my scale, it's going to tell me that it weighs 262 grams. But I only want 100 grams of flour, let's say. Well, I could either remember that 262 plus 100 is equal to 362 and just wait till the scale gets to 362, or I can hit this button over here that says tare and it will subtract the weight of this container, put it back to 0, and now I can just remember that I need to put 100 grams of flour in there, okay? So a tare function is awesome. You also want to keep in mind what kind of units of measurement do you usually use or do your recipes usually refer to? Grams and ounces are something that recipes will usually call for. Let's see what this one has here. You can switch between units by just hitting this unit button. I have grams, I have pounds and ounces, I have just ounces, kilos, and there you go. So those are the things you're wanting. You're wanting ounces and grams, okay? Those are really nice. Weighing ingredients is pretty straightforward. You just put them in the bowl and look for that number that your recipe calls for to be shown on this display. Not all scales are digital. However, I really do recommend a digital scale. It just makes it a little bit more accurate. Instead of having to look at where that needle is pointing to, this will really just give you down to, you know, the ounce or the gram, and super easy to use. You're also going to want to consider the margin of error, okay? You're looking for a smaller margin of error as opposed to, let's say, you know, plus or minus 10 grams. Is this going to be accurate to 1 gram, to 2 gram, okay? That's another thing you're going to want to consider when you're purchasing a scale. Okay, if scale life is not for you, that's okay. That's okay. We probably already have a set of at least some cups and some spoons, if not some liquid measuring cups at home. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, you can use these as well. It's going to be a little less accurate, but I'm going to give you some tips and tricks in a minute about how to make sure that your volumetric measurements are as accurate as possible, okay? But let's just talk about the set that you probably want to have at home if you're going to go in this direction. I prefer a set that has, for my measuring cups, a 1/4 cup, a 1/3 of a cup, a 1/2 a cup, and a 1 cup measurement at a minimum, okay? And in terms of our spoons, I like to have a 1/4 teaspoon, a 1/2, a 1/3, 1 teaspoon, and a tablespoon as well, okay? There's all sorts of different increments, but I feel like that those are your basics. If something calls for, let's say, 2/3 of a teaspoon, you can just measure 1/3 twice, okay? I do think that it is important to have a liquid measuring cup as well, okay? So these here, these are for dry ingredients. These are for liquid ingredients, okay? So two different forms of volumetric measurements 4 ingredients. This is probably a little bit bigger than what you have at home. At my house, I have a glass 1 cup volumetric measuring cup, okay? And that works just fine. Sometimes if I'm making stock or something and it calls for 8 cups, yes, I measure it 8 times. I do, okay? This one is an 8 cup, a volumetric measuring cup. And these work great for liquids because the specific way that we need to measure those, okay? So when we're measuring liquids, okay, there's just a couple of things you wanna do. Number one, obviously if your container is clear, that's a winner right there, okay? And usually they are. So usually if they're plastic or if they're glass, you can see through them, and that's the way to do it. So let's say we're trying to measure 1 cup of water. I put my water in here. What you don't wanna do is hold it up with your hand, okay? You wanna place it down on a flat surface. Number 2, you wanna wait till the water or whatever liquid it is settles. And then the third thing you wanna do, because I'm up here and I'm looking at it and my eyes are going down right now, what I'm seeing is actually a measurement that is over 1 cup. What you wanna do is you actually wanna get down to eye level. And when you do that, what I can see now is that I am in fact at the 1 cup line on my measuring cup. If you want to get super accurate, then you have to keep in mind that when you're measuring liquids, oftentimes there's what's called a meniscus shape, okay? And so the edges of your liquid are gonna be right up against the edge of your container. In fact, gonna be a tiny bit higher than the very center, okay? And so if you wanna be super accurate, it's that the lowest portion of your liquid that should be hitting that line, that 1 cup line, okay? And so that's the most accurate way to measure your liquids by volume. All right, now we're gonna talk about the most accurate way to measure your dry ingredients by volume. I'm talking about flours, cocoa powders, brown sugars, spices, baking powder, baking soda, all those things. Now I will tell you that granulated sugar is actually pretty accurate when we measure by volume because it doesn't compact. We can reproduce the results several times. But for things like powdered sugar, cocoa powder, flour, we know that there's a big difference there on how much we can compact things. So I have some all-purpose flour right here, and I'm gonna do a little test for you because sometimes, people might say, all right, come on lady, what's the big deal? I'm just making chocolate chip cookies and I'm using, let's say, 4 cups of flour. Okay, I'm gonna show you what the big deal is. If I were to take 1 cup of flour, okay, we use that edge to kind of level off the top, okay? So what do I have here? I have a measurement of 282 grams of flour. Oh, nope, it just changed to 280. And I want you to see this. I want you to see this here because I don't want any non-believers, okay? So 280 grams of flour. Now, let me put this back out here. The proper way to get the most accurate form of volumetric measurement will be to use a spoon method to aerate. And what I mean is we're gonna fluff it up. It's not simple, we're just gonna make it fluffy. And instead of taking my cup and scooping into the container, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my spoon to spoon my dry ingredient into this. And in fact, I'm gonna go over. And now we wanna use something like a knife to level off the top of this here. And now, do you remember what we had earlier? It was 280 grams. Let's see what we get this time. All right, everybody, we got 238 grams. Okay, so that's a 42 gram difference. Maybe 42 grams won't make the difference in a particular recipe, but now let's think about scaling. What if you're gonna take that chocolate chip recipe that uses 1 cup of flour and make 4 cups of flour in a batch size that large? I had to do some math in my head there, but that's about 160 gram difference of flour, okay? This is a significant difference. And think about this, if now we're talking about leavening agents like baking powder, baking soda, something that adds sweetness like powdered sugar, that is a significant difference, okay? So we want to make sure that if you're using volumetric measurements, that you're using our spoon method to fluff up, to aerate, and to spoon into the container and then level off gently, okay? I hope that this video answered some baking questions that you had, or maybe you didn't know you had them. Let me know if there's any other topics that you'd like me to cover, and please check out some of our other videos and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.